Another new year and yet another new Red Bull teammates for Max Verstappen. Liam Lawson will become the least experienced driver in Red Bull's history, having started just 11 races across 2 different seasons. And whilst that's not exactly ideal preparation, we all know that with Red Bull, it is not about the ideal circumstances, it is about taking your opportunity when you're given the chance. Since Ricciardo left in 2018, Red Bull have really struggled to find a stable replacement alongside Max. They had Gasly, Albon, Perez, and even brought Ricciardo back into F1 in 2024 to essentially replace himself, but even that didn't work out. It's fair to say that with Lawson, Red Bull have done a complete 180 and have definitely gone back to their roots. When Perez joined in 21, he was the exact opposite of Lawson, being a non-Red Bull affiliated driver who had been in F1 for 10 years. And whilst he had a decent stint at Red Bull, he never really was able to make that seat his own. Over the last few years, Red Bull have completely abandoned their previous philosophy of constantly having that conveyor belt of young drivers. And instead of taking on drivers like De Vries and Ricciardo, they should have been doing more in the lower formulas to either scout better young talent or do a better job in developing and preparing the drivers they already had for Formula 1. Lawson at Red Bull is absolutely a course correction, but the landscape at Red Bull now is very different to what it was when Checo joined in 2021. For one, Max's future at the team is by no means a guarantee, and so whilst you're not going to find someone better to replace him, you have to start at least planning for Max's potential successor. The other thing that's very different is that Red Bull last year definitely started to decline, and apart from the on-track performance, the amount of key people they have lost over the last few years could not be underestimated. Rob Marshall, Adrian Newey, Jonathan Wheatley, and Will Courtney, amongst many others. All of this means that Lawson is entering a team that in theory should put him under less pressure because the bulk of the pressure should be on Red Bull's management and also their technical team to make sure that they can still give Max a race-winning car. The problem with that is that across Checo's 4 years at Red Bull, there was a very clear pattern. When the car had a sizable performance advantage over the others, like in 22 and 23, Checo had no problem as he was picking up podiums and even the odd win. When the performance got closer, however, like in 21 and especially in 24, he was exposed and started to clearly cost Red Bull in the Constructors' title. There's been a lot made about the handling characteristics of the Red Bull, basically ever since Ricciardo left. Max is a special talent with incredible sensitivity. He can cope with rear end instability better than anyone else, as long as it also means that he can get the front end rotation that he wants as well. That's also why he tends to struggle more on bumpy street tracks like Monaco, Baku and Singapore, which demands a more compliant neutral setup, but those tracks are a minority throughout the calendar, and the best compromise is exactly what Max wants because when he can extract performance, that is when the car is at its absolute best. Liam Lawson, like every single driver who came before him, is going to have the exact same problem. There's a bit of a misnomer that Max has this super unique driving style that no one else has, and that is just factually wrong. There is plenty of drivers like Alex Albon, for example, who also have a bias for an oversteer balance on corner entry, but the difference is that the Red Bull is the most extreme and the most unstable when it comes to that kind of rotation under braking, and Max can cope with it better than anyone else can. Lawson has done more than enough testing in the Red Bull car and simulator to know what it's going to be like, and even though he's only ever driven Red Bull and Racing Bull machinery, that was the exact same for Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly when they joined the team. That's not to say that there aren't any drivers out there who could also step into that Red Bull and also be race winners alongside Max. And now, just to be clear, this isn't a discussion of who would beat who in equal cars, but if you had a Leclerc, Russell or even Norris in that second Red Bull, then there would be days where, for example, Charles Leclerc would beat Max during a weekend in a way in which Perez was never able to do. No driver throughout Formula 1 history has been unbeatable or even immune to pressure. But Red Bull has put itself in a very tricky spot because with the intervention of Max himself, they are putting very clear limitations on the types of drivers that they are willing to hire. The fact that they didn't sign Carlos Sainz, who objectively, as we have seen alongside Leclerc, is a top driver, makes it crystal clear that Red Bull are not looking to have the two best drivers possible. Max has a big say on who his teammate is, and it was widely reported that he flat out didn't want Sainz or his dad at the team due to prior tensions. And now, this isn't necessarily because Max is afraid of competition, because Max believes that he can beat anyone in the same car. It's more so because, for one, Max has the power in the team to have say in those decisions, and he's also pragmatic about what kind of driver lineup will put him in the best position possible to win championships. Throughout Formula 1 history, the most successful driver lineups like Hamilton, Bottas and Schumacher, Barrichello have always been when you pair up a clear number 1 with a still competitive number 2. Red Bull are in this tricky spot where they need a better driver to help them in the constructors, but a driver who won't unsettle the environment that Max now has within the team. These self-imposed limitations on what kind of drivers they can and can't have make it doubly difficult for Red Bull to find an ideal and long-lasting driver lineup. There's no way that Max would accept a Leclerc or Russell coming into the team. Sainz, despite being more than talented enough, was eliminated due to prior tension, and someone like Checo was too much of a midfield driver. Finding a driver who magically falls within all of these limitations is almost impossible. For those reasons, once Red Bull knew that the Perez situation was untenable, it was almost automatic that they were going to look inside their own driver pool, and since we know that Red Bull, for multiple reasons, don't see Yuki as a Red Bull driver, Liam Lawson was the only logical choice. Lawson's Red Bull debut is going to be a bizarre one for many reasons, because for one, I'm not even sure what to consider his rookie season at this point, given that he has never seen an F1 preseason despite already doing 11 races across 2 different seasons. Another thing that's quite strange is that for a driver who's only done 11 races, there is already an abnormal amount of hate and criticism towards him from the fans that's only going to make his job even harder, as if it wasn't difficult enough as it is. And now, to be honest, some of the criticism that I have seen online that he has been receiving has been totally bizarre to me, because it feels like people are projecting their frustrations that should be aimed at Red Bull onto Lawson instead. When he was chosen as Ricciardo's replacement, he replaced one of the most popular drivers on the grid. When he was chosen over Yuki for the Red Bull seat, Yuki objectively deserved it more. All of these decisions, however, were made by Red Bull. All he's ever done is come into Formula 1 mid-season twice under very difficult circumstances, and he's also fought very hard against the likes of Perez and Alonso on track, which for some reason people criticized him for. It feels like he's coming in with this extra layer of pressure as this apparent bad guy, even though I am not sure what people expected him to do differently with the opportunities that he was given. Although Lawson is coming in with this cloud over his head, the fact that there is this uncertainty over Max's future, and also that Red Bull are in decline, I think that it will give him a slightly more sympathetic environment within Red Bull. The problem they have is that if Lawson is just as bad as Perez, or even worse, what's their alternative? Tsunoda is a no-go. I doubt that Hadjar will impress enough to warrant an instant promotion, and even though Arvid Lindblad in F2 has huge potential and is certainly a driver that I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on, he is not going to be ready for Red Bull for at least 2 or 3 years. That is why I think so much of Red Bull's second driver dilemma is self-inflicted, because had Lawson been there at RB for the whole of the 2024 season instead of Ricciardo, at least he would have been better prepared than he is now. Another strange dynamic that might be in Lawson's favour is the fact that we're going to have a lot of rookies for comparison in 2025. Now again, Lawson is not technically a rookie. That line, to be honest, is very blurred in terms of what to actually call him, but I do think that in 2025 we are going to see a massive amount of fluctuation between teammates, and it's because there will be a massive clash of experience mixed with youth. Someone like Antonelli is going to be a fascinating comparison because whilst there is a 4-year age gap between them, once you're in Formula 1, and especially once you're racing for a top team, age kind of becomes irrelevant because at that point, it is simply a case of you're either good enough or you're not to race at that level. Lawson has almost certainly got the most difficult teammates and circumstances to deal with, but he is also the driver with the most experience. Across the grid, even compared to drivers like Behrman, If Lawson is making more mistakes than anyone else, that's going to seriously pile on the pressure, but inversely, if the other rookies are making more mistakes while he looks more settled even if he is underperforming, then it might just give him that little bit more breathing room in the eyes of Red Bull. Given that Max is driving at a level as high as we have ever seen anyone else drive in Formula 1 history, I am not sure that you'll ever be able to find a perfect teammate within the parameters that Red Bull have. Red Bull is a very specific type of team. Their culture, the pressures that are associated with driving for them, and the way in which the team is built around Max, I don't think is best suited to get the best out of everyone. Maybe it is just a case of Max being so good and so extraordinary that he makes even great drivers look ordinary. But considering that McLaren was able to find a partner for Senna, Ferrari was able to find 2 partners for Michael Schumacher, and even Mercedes found a partner for Hamilton, it still feels like Red Bull haven't done a good enough job of finding Max a long-term partner. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe, that would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.